I want to welcome everybody to the conversation that Joe and I are about to have. I was a fangirl of Joe's newsletter when he would send it out. It was so beautiful to read, and the art that you would generate for it, like fit. It was almost like the art itself really helped integrate the words you were writing. And then you went on a hiatus for many good reasons. Part of it was like you were physically moving location. It's just hard to kind of keep up when you're on the road. And I
Yeah.
missed you and I missed the newsletter. And I just like
Uh,
emailed back and I was like, when are you coming back? And you've done a series of other things. You are recently on the ESAR board, which I was super excited to see. That's pretty exciting. And I just love meeting other astrologers, but definitely I was a huge fan of yours just from the immediacy. I love the energy that you provide, the information you provide, and you're very inspirational just to like witness as an astrological colleague. So thanks so much for just kind of being a part of the conversation. And if you have to grab your cup of coffee beforehand, like
yeah, no,
you're
it's all
totally
good.
here.
It's already here.
Yeah, sweet. So we're just
Um,
going to have a conversation about astrology and maybe magic and art and prediction. And we're recording it right at the eclipse. So it feels auspicious just for that alone. So welcome, Joe. Thanks for joining.
yeah, thank you. That's so nice to hear all these nice words.
They're true. I'm
Um,
totally true.
yeah, it's wild because as an astrologer, sometimes, especially early in your career, like I am, you do these things and you think nobody's paying attention, nobody's
Hmm.
looking, and it's always nice hearing that. In fact, people are paying attention.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so thank you for having me.
Sure. Can you share a little bit about just your astrological journey, like where you started and how you got to where you're at, like right now at this moment?
Yeah, I'm part of the wave of pandemic astrologers.
Hmm.
2020 came around and it really kind of spawned my whole world around. The reason why our art is such a big part of my astrology is because I went to school for painting and drawing. Right before deciding to become an astrologer, I was just about to open my recording studio as a music producer and musician. But then, of course, the pandemic came. I couldn't afford the studio space, and I had to find work online. And I just wrote an article about Mercury retrograde at one point just because it was gonna pay.
Yeah.
And I liked astrology and it was cool. Um, and in writing that, I just fell in love with it. I'm like, oh my God, like people actually can have like a whole job as an astrologer and just like
Hmm.
writing and making astrology content. That sounds awesome. And so um, very shortly after, I got a job with Astrology Hub, and I was their podcast producer for a couple of years. And then that kind of just like spiraled into me being an astrologer full time today.
Yeah, that's awesome. So do you see like one-on-one clients? Is it just writing content and doing behind the scenes work? Like what does your practice look like?
Yeah, I do all of the above. Mercury Rising. Mercury Rising is the name of my practice, and I also have the astrology channel. So
Mm,
I'm mostly in the content creation space, and even the kind of client work that I do is more electional astrology based. And so
mm,
I'm doing a lot of project management, but using
mhm.
astrology to do that, which is a lot of fun. And yeah, just creating content on YouTube. I'm also the podcast producer for Christopher Renstrom's astrology now,
Cool.
and Isar also I'm their marketing director, and yeah, that's what it is.
It's a lot of hats. It's a lot of hats.
Yes, many hats.
Yeah. So there are like moments throughout the year that people get like the muggles or the normies get like interested in astrology. It's like Mercury retrograde and eclipses seem to be the one.
Yeah,
And we're in eclipse season right now. And so there's a lot of, I mean, part of like the myth of the nodes is like the Naga Vasuki like churned up the waters around the holy mountain, and that churning and that revealing of what's under the water kind of that all that detritus or that chum gets floating up to the top for better or
yeah,
worse. And it seems like the collective experience is that like all this stuff is agitation, all this stuff is disrupted, and things are coming to the surface, and then they're immediately fearful because they're like, I didn't, this came out of nowhere, or why is this coming back? And so the fear element of astrology also gets churned up, which most astrologers are like, don't come at it at fear, like don't be fearful, even though we are like, oh, Neptune Aries, like
yeah,
we
totally.
are also participating in that too. But like how so with all of the agitation and the emotion of fear being turned up for everybody, people seek answers. They go to their clergy, or they go to their community, or they go to their oracle, their cards, their astrologers. How do you approach if a client comes to you or a friend and is like, what is going on? How do you take um, that that fear response of something that is legitimately happening, and then how do you help them transmute it into something practical, something functional, something beautiful, something transformative, or excavation? Can you walk us through your process with that?
Yeah, it's always very hard because it's not so much just about doing that for the person, but like you said, you, the astrologer, you're
Mm,
in it, and so you have to do that for yourself first. Like,
mm-hmm,
how can I not be afraid of this so I can speak about this and
mm,
not project my fear onto other people and everybody is scared, and
yeah.
that really doesn't work well for anybody. And so I think that usually when I start my process is really from that place of how do I feel about this, and what is the thing that will get me to not feel so bad about this if I'm feeling bad?
Mm,
Not that facing bad things in life is a bad thing. Sometimes we just have to do it, but it's tricky getting into a space where we address the fear in the room, but also come up with a solution. I think that's
mm,
also my thing. It's like, yes, I recognize what's scary about this thing. I recognize what could go wrong, but then the next step is just what can I do about this?
yeah.
Um, and it's in that step that I start to abstract things a little bit,
Mm,
and that's why I work with images a lot, both in my
mm,
client work and in my horoscopes, is because sometimes sometimes things are really scary, and there's no word that you can say that will make it feel less scary, but
mm,
an image can do that in many
mm-hmm,
different ways. So when I arrive to that place where I'm or trying to do some problem solving with the delineation or the transit that be, I think the image really helps me focus on just like what does this actually look like, as opposed to
mm,
this like fearful thing that's amorphous and just like going all over the place. And so I just try to think of like, let's say a Virgo eclipse. I was talking to my partner who's also an astrologer yesterday, and we're like, okay, so what does the Virgo eclipse mean?
mm-hmm,
Okay, what is a moon in Virgo? And then we go, okay, so what are animals that reminds us of moon in
mm,
Virgo? What are places that remind us of moon in Virgo? And then slowly but surely, you have like a setting, you have a
mm,
figure, and you have an action, and that in and of itself is the image. I think from, and I think the reason why I like to do that is because it it stops the brain from going to that fearful space where you're just receiving the information,
yeah.
and you're now invited to look at the image and be like, what does this mean to me? Like
Mm-hmm,
I understand, uh like if you're watching my horoscopes or you having a reading with me, you also get a little bit of an explanation of what my intention was behind the image. But I
mm,
think that it's always fascinating to have clients or people who watch the horoscopes just comment on what that meant for them, because then I think
yeah.
that teaches people how to do astrological delineation in a detached way, that it's not so much about what's going to happen, but what could happen, or what does this make me feel, or what's the moment that I'm in right now. I hope that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it reminds me of tarot. I have much more of a foundation in astrology, and I would always be like, you tarot readers have it so easy. People just like go to you and they like, sit down and trust. And then tarot people are like, you astrologers have it easier because like people think we're just fortune tellers, and I was like, no, people think we're fortune tellers. And then when I started to
Exactly.
integrate both of them and seeing the crossover between the two, using tarot images as the decans to help explain the story within a natal chart is like, to me, like that is so helpful to be able to say, okay, well, let's talk about the last 10 degrees of Cancer. Let's look at the 4 of Cups. Like, let's look at the story that we're talking about within the context of this image. Because, like, an image is worth 1,000 words. I think it's probably worth
Yeah.
a zillion words. I mean, like, there's so many, it can just exponentially grow from an image. And that's why I loved the images that you gave, because, like, you weren't just stating facts about an astrological transit. You were kind of creating the scene, creating the vibe, creating an environment, creating the structure for an infinite amount of possibilities to operate between. It's funny, I
Yeah.
just finished reading A Wrinkle in Time with my son last night, and
Cool.
the very end of it, they were, at the very end trying to rescue the younger brother from it, like the dark amorphous power of it. And one of the superpowers was like, we are contained within this framework, but we have infinite freedom within this framework. And when I was reading that, and I was like, that it like, of course I'm reading this at this very moment, it felt
Yeah,
apropos
of
for the very
course.
moment. But just even in this conversation, I think that's why images are so infinite, and that they can offer context. And when you can find yourself within a story, that endless fear that is like Mercury's retrograde again, or I'm in my Saturn return, or what all those, like, those checkbox, fear mongering statements that we have in astrology, is just so much more like, it's just easier to see a way out if you feel trapped,
Yeah.
instead of just all forever bound to a chain of fear. So yeah, using the tarot for me has been what that way out. But the way you do it, are you creating individual unique pieces for clients, like for a reading? Like, do you create an image for that?
Yeah, so the way that like my editorial calendar kind of goes is that I have the horoscopes that
Mm-hmm.
I'm posting every week, but then every month I have a seasonal report and I just highlight one specific transit that
Mm-hmm.
people are usually really curious about. Like this month I had a Venus retrograde.
Mm-hmm.
So I had like the one Venus retrograde specialty reading that ends with an image. And it's always fun because it's really quick and easy. We're just looking at Venus in your chart and what it means, but then we end with the image, and it becomes a more collaborative process where we're both chatting about this image and what that image makes you feel
Mm-hmm.
and how you see yourself in that story. And yeah, I think that that's the reason why I keep bringing images more and more and more to my readings,
Mm-hmm.
because one of the things that really early on in my astrology career that I always used to say is that I really believe that no person can read their chart better than that person itself. And I think that having the image there bypasses all the crazy astrology aspects and all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff to just look at the image and what it means to you and what that story is telling you. So I use it in a more controlled setting, I guess, with clients, but yeah, I find it very fruitful, and it's always fun to just sit back after I've made the image and just have the person tell me what that meant for
Yeah.
them. And it's so cool.
Well, I was going to say, like, do you learn in the process of creating the image? Does it help elucidate what you were like, even more than what you intended going into it? Or is it also within the conversation of the client? Like, because you're in a way like teaching yourself through that image, through the process of making it, correct?
Hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it really did make me be a lot more specific with the way that I think
Mm-hmm.
about aspects and any delineation. I don't know. For people who have tuned into my horoscope, whenever I start a day, I go through the whole list
Mm-hmm.
of considerations for a planet. It's in this sign, it's doing this, and that. And I just built a system where I go through um, the scales of dignity, and then I attribute a specific thing. So, like the sign is the setting, or like the colors that I'm going to be using.
Mm-hmm.
The decan, I usually use like an action that's happening. That's usually very similar to what's happening in the tarot card as well.
Mm-hmm.
With um, the bounds and the terms, it's usually like an interaction that's happening between two planets.
Mm-hmm.
So one is kind of like setting the rules for the other.
Yeah.
And I think aspects kind of like are also a little bit of that. So just it teaches me how to really walk through the layers of dignity,
Mm-hmm.
but it does it in a way where I don't actually have to say that out in a sentence. I can just put the image up, and I
Yeah.
think that the sentence comes from the client then when they're sitting in front of me and they're reading the image as if it were a chart in a way. I'm just translating all the chart little bits for them in like a pretty image where they can where it's more easily digestible, I guess. And so
Yeah.
I guess I do end up learning more from from the clients in a sense, because
Hmm.
in a way they're the ones giving the delineation. I'm just
Yeah.
facilitating
Yeah.
that.
You're like creating like an astrological modern Rorschach test for your
Oh
clients.
yeah. Oh my
Like,
God,
what
I
do you
love
see?
that. Ooh, I
Like,
haven't thought about it that way. That's actually pretty cool.
well, I mean, like if because like I I'm always fascinated of like how, even just a planet or an aspect or a condition or a house or all of the variance in astrology, it it then creates, it like refracts that light in so many ways. So it's like the moon can mean so many things. And so like my interpretation of a Virgo full moon is one individual's interpretation. And sure, I can, I have experience and I have catalog of knowledge and I have anecdotal, things that have said to me, but another person is just going to keep adding to that. And so I think
Yeah.
the use of image really does incite that invitation to whatever it is astrology is, whatever that light or that information or that oracle or that language or that love or whatever it is. It's like each person has um, I call astrology like herbalism. It's like the people's medicine. It's like you don't really need anything. You can just
Yeah.
divine, that's it's just there. And to have a client be able to look at an image and pull something very specific out that you really didn't have any way of knowing or telling them ahead of time that they sought it out because they were in a space that was, held by an astrologer with the context of astrology, and they could pull out this one tiny little, very important to them, but maybe missed by you because you didn't have that experience. And I think that you
Yeah.
you really get there through art, and like that in itself is the magic of it all, which is kind of like what the subject of this was, is like art as magic, in the context of astrology. So do you give art and or magic, do you give it a planet that it rules for you, or overall, like do you find it in all of the planets? Like how is your relationship with planetary workings through art discerned?
Yeah. I think image making is a very lunar, solar sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just because of light.
Yeah,
They're the luminaries.
literally.
And we see things because of light.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah. Wait, sorry. There were two parts of the question, and I think I lost the
Yeah.
second part.
So like, do you assign magic or art to a planet, or do you see
Yeah.
it like divvied up? Like, do you have a relationship with the planet that you think like, oh, the moon is my artistic influence? It was kind of a meandering question, so sorry for
Yeah, no, I get
yeah.
it. Yeah, I think maybe we can say like the sun is the image part, just the
Mm,
image in and of itself, and then the moon maybe is the magic that comes with it.
yeah.
Um, and I think I relate to that even looking at my own chart, because that was one of the things that I wanted to understand as an astrologer.
Mhm.
Because when I went into astrology was very much this, do I do astrology or do I do art thing?
Mm,
And I have like the sun rising in my chart opposite Neptune. So like the topic of images is very like a big thing
mhm,
for me. And yeah, and I think in exploring the sun and exploring Neptune and that opposition in my chart, that's when I realized that actually my astrology is probably gonna look a lot more like art than I
mm,
give it credit for.
mhm,
So I think that that's how I built the relationship between those things for me. But I think we can find art and magic in pretty much any planet. It's just it might just be a different flavor of those
mm,
things.
mhm,
Because I think that the way that I do it, I guess, is really focused on just the image itself and just having the person be looking at that image and just be lost in that image until a message comes through or something
mhm,
along those lines. But I guess the same can be achieved through like music meditation, just having like a drone playing in the background, which can
mhm,
maybe be more of like a Venus thing, or like a person chanting, or mantras can also be like Venus the voice or
mhm.
anything along those lines, or like a person fasting and being like tucked away in a dark corner can be Saturn magic or whatever.
Mhm.
So I feel like every planet has a little bit of magic to offer.
Yeah.
It just depends on your style, I guess.
Yeah. Did you work with magic before astrology? Like, did you have any sort of practice before you became an astrologer?
Yeah, I was experimenting with some folk magic because I'm from Brazil or originally. I went to Canada in 2012, and then I just moved to the States very recently. And a big part of my culture is African American magic in Brazil and also Aboriginal indigenous magic in Brazil. And I
Mm-hmm.
was just trying to understand a little bit of that because my family is very divorced from that because there's
Mm-hmm.
big issues around race and stuff in Brazil. And so I was just trying to reclaim a little bit of that. But that just very quickly ushered me into astrology and I got into astrological magic. And those were kind of almost simultaneous things happening at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but my first experience with magic was actually making Sun in Aries. It was like a Mercury Kazemi in Aries talisman. Just when I had decided um, to become an astrologer, and my intention, because I wanted to start a YouTube channel then, my intention was to have a successful YouTube channel, and
Mm-hmm.
then shortly after I got my Astrology Hub job, who is a successful
Yeah.
astrology channel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think that experience for me was the thing that like really just clicked, and I was like, oh my God.
And you're Aries 10th house?
Aries Stentas,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, 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 yeah. Um, what was I going to ask? It was when you said, when you were talking about Saturn magic in the corner, like this huge flock of crows like flew across my window because they like live in the meadow right here. There's like turkeys,
That's
and then I was
awesome.
just like distracted by the birds. But what was I going to say? Yeah, I love that that astrology if always pulls us through these ways of like I'm going to do this, and it's like, oh well, here's the chance to then like back thread you to a place that we want you to get, maybe not in the direction you're going. And kazimis are such great like invitations for that too, of like
Yeah, for
you
sure.
get a little secret and then you get pulled off to a part of the throne room that you weren't assuming. So I like that it was a kazimi that kind of like stole your heart a little bit, being in
Yeah,
that.
totally.
um do you have, that's what I was going to ask, do you have magical teachers or instructors? Like what's your engagement with working with other people in the magical community, within astrology?
Yeah, early on I studied a lot with Gemini Brett,
Mm-hmm.
and I read a lot of Gary Caton's work, and I took one of Christopher Warnock's courses, and that was like my magical education. But then with a Mercury Uranus opposition rising in my chart, very quickly I
Same.
was like,
Same.
I get it. I get this. I'll just do my own thing.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I
So
think
that's
there's
how it went
like
for me.
gatekeeping to a certain degree is good, but yeah, I have Uranus Mercury opposite too, and it's kind of
Oh,
like
no way. That's
I'm good,
cool.
I'll do my own thing, it's fine. um
Yeah, because I got like the basics. I think I also studied with Austin Coppock a little bit,
mhm.
but I really just understood the framework, and I think that really is what magic is. Like once you
Yeah.
have the framework, you can do your own thing with it and just experiment and see what works and what doesn't. And
Hmm.
there's definitely been things that I've done that had not worked very well.
Or worked and
Um,
got your attention. Yeah, worked in a
yes.
way that you wanted them to. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely take the more experimental route.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Nervy. It's more of a nervy
Yes.
route. So on that, like, what advice do you have for people that are astro curious or magical curious, within the magic is endless, so there's so many different practices of magic, but within an astrological context, working with planetary magic, what advice do you have for people that are curious about it, wanting to get into it? Who would you start with? That sort of a thing.
Yeah. I think one thing that I wish I knew early on in astrology as a whole, not even just magic, is that nobody really knows what we're doing. Because I think we're- when you're a budding astrologer and you're a student, you kind of like put everybody on a pedestal. Everybody knows
Mm,
everything, and
hmm.
then you actually very quickly realize that we're all trying to figure this out together.
Yeah.
And I think that that really lightens up the pursuit of astrology or the education of astrology, because then it becomes less of um a destination that you're gonna get to,
Hmm.
and it's more of a never-ending process. Because I think that that's when magic and astrology is is best utilized when you just realize that like you actually cannot learn everything there is to learn about
Yeah.
astrology and magic. It's just this endless pursuit. And if you have fun with endless pursuits, this is definitely for you.
Hmm.
But if you don't, then maybe you should look for for instance, other places.
Yeah.
Because I think that that's valid too.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah. Someone described it once about, that they were a more seasoned astrologer, and the way they described it is like once you enter into like the garden labyrinth of astrology, you might meet me and think that I'm way ahead of you on the path, but there it's not linear. We're all just wandering around this intricate maze, and I might have been walking it longer, but we're all in the same maze. And so
Yeah.
talk to everybody you see along the maze, because you're going to learn different things and they're going to learn from you. That it isn't a linear competition, you're better or worse than me. It's like it's just time. Like it's on my website, astrology. It's about time. That's all it is. It's
Yeah.
just about time, timing, learning about time, the magic of time, the beauty of time. It's not linear. It is like furiously multifaceted and confusing and beautiful. And yeah, if you like to get from point A to point B, don't study astrology. Like, sure, you can read an ephemeris, but that's
Yeah.
not, that you're if you get into an ephemeris, then you're going to get lost in the sacred geometry of it all. So that's not even linear in itself.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I appreciate when people are honest about like their like to be an authority of astrology, you can have lots of experience and time under your belt. And I love, learning from people like that. But it is less of like a competition of like who knows more, because like it doesn't matter if you're your own astrologer for your like local community or your friends. Like everybody kind of needs that. So
Yeah.
don't just defer to the veterans. Learn from them and they'll learn from you. Even Robert Hand still around doing readings. Like
Yeah.
like he doesn't know everything about astrology either. He knows a whole heck of a lot, and it's funny to see him on Instagram, but
I know.
it's so strange. I love to see it, but it's like, but even he is still curious about it all, and like the curiosity never ends. To me, that is the magic of astrology, is like once you get hooked on it, like the curiosity just stays. Sometimes you need a break, sometimes you need a sabbatical from
Yeah.
just having all that information, but the magic is just the endless curiosity. It's like a self-propelled machine at a certain point. Um, how do you like integrate or consume? Uh, do you read? Do you watch podcasts? Do you listen to lectures? Like, what's your favorite modality of learning within this realm?
Yeah. When I was studying, when I had a lot of time to study, I was reading a lot.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I can barely watch podcasts because I'm editing all of
Mm-hmm.
them. So that's for me, I would say podcast, but that's because I'm like behind the scenes editing and
Mm-hmm.
publishing all of those. But I think one of the best places to learn, and this is a thing that really helped me early on, is just getting used to looking at the chart like it's a clock, and less as like this this magical mystical thing,
Mm-hmm.
which but I think that one of one of the ways that I learned the most was just like a really loud car passed around the street. I wonder what that looks like in a chart.
Mm-hmm.
Or I went to the coffee shop today and like it's all chaotic. What's the chart looking like?
Mm-hmm.
These kinds of things and just like getting on the groove of just observing and less trying to delineate and trying to figure out
Mm.
what something means. I think that's really what helped me the most.
Yeah.
Especially in like electional and horary astrology. One of the things that I really loved when I was first getting into electional astrology, it was just elect walks that I would go on and then
Mm.
just see what kind of things happen around
I
my
love that.
walks.
Yeah.
So yeah, that kind of stuff is really useful.
Yeah. So how many pictures do you have on your screenshots album of charts of the moment?
Oh my God. I don't even know. And it's always
I
like the weirdest notes on the thing. It's
I
like plane left or
yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's wild. But
Oh, you froze.
oh, I did? Oh, okay.
Oh, you're
Am I
good now.
back? Okay.
You're back. to see what the chart of the moment is
Um,
for that. Yeah.
oh yeah.
I'm always I have so many charts of the moment, and a lot of them I don't have notes. So then I like retrospectively, I'm like, what happened then? I need to go to my
What's
text
happened?
threads to see what the chart was saying, because now it's difficult. Um, what else? So what do you have planned going like forward? Like you do horary and electional, and you do the a lot of behind the scenes work, but like what is your it's an eclipse season, so the beginnings and endings, do you have ideas of the ripples of what this eclipse is happening for you, or kind of like what's on the horizon for you for now?
Yeah, I think the Pisces eclipse largely has been my ESAR journey because I applied
Mm.
for ESAR and I was like, this is totally not gonna be a thing. I'm just gonna
Mm-hmm.
apply anyways and see what happens.
Yeah.
And I think it was just around the Pisces new moon that I got the
Yeah.
news of like you're part of ESAR now.
Yeah.
So that's gonna be the big thing for me right now. But I've also been working really hard on the astrology channel,
Mm.
trying to get some new shows in there. Kyle, some people might have noticed watching the horoscopes that Kyle is not there anymore because he's working on his own show called Killer Cosmos, looking at the birth charts of serial killers, which will be really cool.
Wow.
Um, but for myself, I'm really just figuring out how to create this astrology channel thing. That's
Mm-hmm.
like the really big thing for me because the
Yeah.
way that I envision is eventually being a space for not just me and Kyle, but for all sorts of astrology shows to be
Mm-hmm.
there. So I'm just really busy trying to get a content calendar figured out and like a cast of people,
Mm-hmm.
and all of that. So hopefully that would be a nice Saturn return endeavor for me because
Yeah.
it's coming.
Yeah. One thing I love that your the horoscope, the weekly horoscopes, is like you give you give a little history lesson or context with the dignities, but within that, then you like you show like how much agency do you have for the week. And that's something that I
Mhm.
think most everybody misses, just like when they're, because there are some transits that are just harder to like, you can just shake your fist at the gods and that's pretty much what you
Yeah.
got. But like you give like real, like tangible, like you've got a little bit of a chance to kind of like engage with this and maybe see some results that you want to see, or
Yeah.
just wait until this passes. And I think that that's like such functional advice to be able to give to people and do it in weekly bits of time. I just kudos for you to include that,
Oh,
because I
thank
think
you.
that is so helpful to people when they hear things or they're not as familiar with astrology. They're just like, it just feels like we're just fucked. Like that's it,
Yeah,
like
totally.
hands up, like whatever, what am I supposed to do with
Oh my
this? So
God.
yeah, so I think
Yeah,
it's
I hear
great.
you.
I think it's great that you just do that. So yeah, I'm glad that you're building that, because I feel like it's a way that most people consume information now. And even if it's on 1.5 speed, to kind of get through it to the next one, because there's so much out there.
Yeah,
um,
totally.
but yeah, I appreciate all that you kind of just put out into the community, because it's approachable, but it's still like very deeply researched and deeply founded, especially with just like talking about the dignities and kind of bringing that to be more of the vernacular in astrology, instead of it just being like good and bad, is putting it into that
Yeah.
moral binary, which isn't very helpful at all. So yeah,
Yeah,
I love
which is
that.
why I love Dignity so much because
Mm-hmm.
you find like these weird combinations that
Mm-hmm.
seem to not work but kind of work. Like
Yeah.
who would have thunk that Mars would do so well in Leo at the end of Leo?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
what's the other weird one? Like Mars in Pisces too, doing like so good.
Mm-hmm.
I always like playing with those.
Yeah. Yeah. Whenever someone asks me about like cusps, that's like one of the things that people ask, like, oh, I'm a cusp. And it's like, are you just a malefically bound Gemini? you know?
Yeah.
Like
That's my Cancer rising in
yeah.
Saturn's bounds.
Yep. 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 Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much for just joining. It was nice to meet you and digitally. And yeah, we'll just stay in touch. And thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.